Welcome to Living Practice, the podcast where we explore the intersections of creativity, spirituality, and curiosity. I'm your host, Ricky Horvatic. You may know me on the internet as Star Moth Press, and let's get into it. This week I want to talk about curiosity and the space between projects and the goo that we melt into as we are waiting for our bodies and minds and spiritual vessels to make the transformation we are in the process of moving towards. That is a mouthful, but I found myself over the past 2 weeks feeling like I'm in a stage of shedding layers and realigning where I am headed and seeing where my compass is telling me to go. I don't know about y'all, but I would love to go from being the hungry caterpillar to being the beautiful butterfly who has wings that can explore more vast territory. But unfortunately, there is something that occurs where we kind of have to break down and shed what is no longer ours to carry into the next version of ourselves. And that's kind of the space I've been inhabiting the last 2 weeks. If that feels familiar to you, or if it sounds like something you've been going through, I would love to hear in the comments to see if there's something going on at this time where maybe we're all just like in the void as we move into a new season of creation. This is not normally a season where I experience this type of feeling, where I hide away and I'm not as comfortable being seen and I step away from my desk and I don't really want to make anything. So it kind of threw me for a loop. If you pay attention, I didn't put out a podcast episode last week. It was a busy week for me, but also I just didn't really have anything to say, and I didn't want to say something just for the sake of it. And I had to get really comfortable with that. I also didn't put out an essay last week. It was really uncomfortable for me to sit in this idea that I don't always have to be producing and that it's okay to step away and you don't have to always have an output. And that's something that I've not always been comfortable with. Usually during this time when I am having issues with creating in the ways that you may be familiar with seeing me share, which is writing and collage and art journaling, I find solace in fiber arts, and recently I've been enjoying slow stitching. I've made myself a slow stitching journal, and so that's the way that my creativity has been manifesting. The other day I was listening to a podcast where Damien Eccles was the guest, and over December I was reading in his Patreon the Tao Te Ching that he was providing commentary on, and it was providing a lot of, I don't want to say epiphany. Epiphany is not the right word, but there was like a level of understanding that was coming through because of what he was sharing. And so I was doing that over December and I kind of forgot about it. And when I got busy, I sort of hopped off there, and I find myself back there now because of the interview. And it was something that I was just watching and slow stitching too. And I found that process really enjoyable. I also wanted to dive into other forms of media that I like to enjoy other than books, because I do read a lot of books. But I found myself wanting to watch an old scary movie, and that's what led me to decide to start a new Substack, which will be a home for all of my weird niche, like paranormal and spooky, scary movies and media and like UFO type stuff, because that is one of the areas that I'm constantly taking in content on, because I really enjoy learning about the ideas of consciousness and exploring what is in the world other than us. and exploring kind of the expansiveness of that. I like the idea of the horror movie as commentary of our social experience in this world. And so I think there's a lot to explore there. And I didn't realize that I have a lot to say in that arena, but I feel like I do. So it's called Strange Static. I'm going to be sharing it there. The name came from the idea that I don't know how many millennials are listening here, but I remember back in like Halloween days when I was a kid and watching scary movies. Specifically, one Halloween I watched Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It was my first foray into Freddy Krueger's lore, and so it was very freaky for me to see that somebody was falling asleep and that they were able to die in their dream. Very scary, totally freaked me out. But I was like, oh man, I want to say like 10 or 11, and we lived in the new house that my parents had just built. And it was the way that like after the movie, the channel kind of fizzed out because it was cable. And it was just, I woke up in the middle of the night and it was static bouncing off of these bare white walls. And there's kind of a liminality and strange ethereal feeling in that. And that's the vibe that I want to bring. It's this in-between, strange, totally unnameable thing that is always trying to be captured and shown in pieces of artwork and media, but is never quite shown, is never quite expressed in the way that it's experienced in our real life. So that's a project that came through during this time of being in the chrysalis and trying to figure out what it is I want to do. I also, leading up to this, finished my book proposal for my book about journal magic, and I sent it off to some publishers. I've already received numerous rejections. I still have a couple hopeful ones out there. I did receive a note from a publisher saying it was a good idea. They just didn't think that they had the scope to publish it and have it be the product that I'm envisioning. And that's part of the reason why I'm deciding to not self-publish it. If you'd like me to explore my process of self-publishing my poetry book and why I'm deciding to try out traditional publishing this time, leave a note, leave a comment so that I can make an episode about that. I would love to talk about publishing because I think that publishing itself is a really powerful medium and we need to be comfortable stepping into that space. And I do think self-publishing is a really powerful way to do that. All of that to say, if you happen to know or are a occult or spiritual publisher who's looking for a book about turning your journal into something that holds your magical practice, I would love to talk. So my email is starmothpress@gmail.com. I have the first 3 chapters written. I have an outline. I have a whole proposal written. And it's a project that came to me 2 to 3 years ago when I first was really getting into the journaling aspect and combining it with my spiritual practice. And it has only gotten stronger and developed from there. So hit me up if that's you. If you want to talk about publishing a book, I would love for us to connect. So I wrote that proposal and kind of stepped into this void space, as I said, and was sitting there and didn't really know how I wanted to move forward. And that's when, as I was consuming these old scary movies and I watched The Age of Disclosure finally, and I was just kind of exploring some more magical commentary, I came up with the idea of Strange Static, and it feels really freeing to create a space where I can share that without feeling like I'm forcing my current Substack community to be sent emails about this if it's not something they're interested in. That's why I didn't move my mailing list over there, so you do have to subscribe to it. I also was able to do a reading, one of my Oracle art readings, which is a tarot reading where I pull some cards for you and then I make a little zine and I do the reading. I write it up for you with some journal prompts, and then I create a piece of art, a piece of abstract art based off that reading. I then send you a picture of just the art for you to contemplate and journal on based off your first impressions. And then at the right moment, it will arrive in the mail as a full package, and you can sit with the art and then open the zine and go through the reading as you're ready. This is available among other things on my Ko-Fi, and I would love it if you guys wanted to check out my shop. I have signed copies of my book, Grace in Every Moment. I have these readings available. They're around $33, I believe. I have artwork available and stickers available, and that is also where my membership for monthly Happy Mail is hosted. An Experiment in Caring is also a project that I'm really passionate about. That is my project of sharing my love of art and paper through the mail. Monthly members usually receive, at minimum, a zine, an originally designed sticker, and an original artwork. And I usually include some other goodies. This past month, I included a little junk journal I made out of some sprinkle gift bags. It was really cute. And so if you want to support any of these projects, these are kind of the things that I know I want my energy to be behind, is these Oracle art readings and promoting my book, which I feel like I get really embarrassed about doing, but it is a book I'm very proud of. I designed the cover, I laid it out myself, and I self-published it. It's called Grace in Every Moment. I have signed copies available for, I believe, $15. And then An Experiment in Caring, I have members there, and I really love creating art and sharing it through the mail. I think the mail is something that is incredibly magical if we allow it to be, and if we remember that it's another form of stepping into our analog existence instead of being stuck in the digital. This is the work that I'm really passionate about right now. Continuing to make artwork, developing my practice with creative writing, and connecting with you all via this podcast, as well as my Substack newsletters. If there's any questions that you have for me that you'd like me to cover on the podcast, or if you'd like me to go into, like I said, self-publishing and the power behind putting your work out there without waiting for permission from an institution, I would love to talk further about that. I'd also like to talk about the power of zines and how zines can help us feel seen and find an outlet and a community to connect with. And like I said, I want to talk more about the strange and unusual that surround us every day without us even realizing it. Or maybe we do realize it, but we feel like we don't have a space to talk about it. So if you have a story of something from the liminal space, something that is strange and unusual, something you don't feel like you can share with anyone, please send me an email. My email is starmothpress@gmail.com. We can discuss your story. I can share it here if you want me to. You can remain anonymous. I can talk about all of the things in this universe that we don't understand, and how vast and how large and all-encompassing it is, and how we only have like a tiny sliver of perception of what's actually going on. I think it's important to remember that. It's easy to think that we have all the answers, but we don't. In my Substack newsletter, Strange Static, I'll be talking about the age of disclosure. I know I'm late to that discussion, but it is what it is. I'm also going to talk about the Backrooms movie, which I saw recently. It was my date for my anniversary. And I have a piece I'm working on about the old 2000s movie Session 9, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it takes place at the Danvers Mental Institution. As someone who has been in a mental institution, I found it a fascinating movie to return to. I watched it as a child, and there were certain things that stuck in my memory, and it was interesting to return to it and see all that I had missed and all that I took in now that I have a very different perspective. As always, you can follow me on social media, Starmoth Press, on Instagram, on TikTok, as well as on Substack. Starmoth.substack.com, starmothpress.com are my two websites that I usually send people off to. I hope that this has been a nourishing transmission for you today. I hope that you continue to question all that goes on around you and allow it to guide your creativity. And most of all, I hope that you go make something today.